It's good to see big turnout. It's freezing outside, so it's nice and warm in here. It's the best place to be. Thank you all for joining us. Just kind of a heads up, it's a non-technical workshop, so if you're here expecting like development tips and stuff, probably the wrong room. So there's a lot of development talks and a lot of stuff going on at the conference. We thought a lot of people would be excited about building in blockchain, building in DeFi, so we do a workshop on the business side of things, like when you're coming up with ideas to build a project, thinking about launching, some of the stuff that you should probably go through, some of the stuff we've gone through, a lot of stuff that we've maybe done poorly and figured out what not to do. So hopefully we can share some of that with you today. At the very end, we're going to have a Q&A session. There's going to be some gifts and prizes for people that ask questions. So come up with some good ones, hopefully some softballs so we can hit them out of the park. But honestly, it's intended to be useful for you guys. So if you have questions, please don't be shy. Make sure you ask at the end, and we'll go from there. My name is JD Gagnon, one of the co-founders and partners in Rome Blockchain Labs. One of my partners, Alex. We also are the founding team, or some of the founding team from Benki. So we had another presentation on that earlier today. Hopefully some of you were there. Yeah.
All right, let's get started. My name is Alex Schul. I'm also one of the co-founders with RBL and Benki as well. So when you're building the future of DeFi, the first thing you start with is the idea. Before you put together a team, before you begin working on tokenomics, you have to really clarify the idea. I've talked with a couple different founders in startups who are saying we're going to build logistics in DeFi. We're going to build money distribution in DeFi. Okay, cool. Like how's the process going to work? What's your solution going to be? They actually don't have an answer for that. You would think something as simple as an idea and a concept around your solution would be played out, but it's actually not. So first look at why, how, and what are you building? Now that sequence of questions, if you guys know Simon Sinek, he's pretty famous for building the why, how, and what process. And what we found is that that's actually very, very important. We'll get to this a bit later on the building team section. But within decentralized finance, in a space that has cutting-edge technology, tons of retail and institutional money pumping into it, you're going to attract a lot of very motivated, very intelligent men and women, right? Now, a lot of those type A personalities aren't the average employee type, usually, right? Is that you can give them a big paycheck, but as soon as somebody figures out, hey, I can work together with somebody and launch my own protocol, they're not going to stay at JP Morgan. They're not going to stay in Microsoft and Google and Amazon. And we've found that at RBL is that we've been hiring engineers from that space. But the reason that we're able to build a good culture is because we have a strong why. We are building a new type of finance at Rome Blockchain Labs. We're launching the Benki money markets. We have Moonwell on Polkadot. We have our terminal, our informatics system. We've gone a very long way in structuring why we're doing what we're doing. So from there, you have to begin looking at the how. JD, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, so I think a mistake that we made at the beginning, a few years ago when we were starting to build some products, is we started with the product first. And we had a technology, we had a concept, but just like any other business, you have to kind of take a step back and say, what is the actual application of this for the users in the end? And we'll talk about that a little bit, but it's just like any other business planning process. And I think a lot of people that start building in blockchain, we get caught up in the, do a fundraise, build a smart contract platform, think about as decentralized as we can make it, and we kind of forget about the business side of things. And how do you actually turn this into something that lasts beyond the first year? Or do you have runway to actually build a proper team? How do you get the runway? And then do people actually want to use what you have? And is there an economic model that makes sense? So I think when you're clarifying the idea, obviously Alex was talking about the why. That's critical for building a team and getting people excited. But I think it's as important to figure out, okay, now we've got this really good idea. We might already have a concept of the technology, but how does that actually translate into some value for your users? And then moreover, how does that turn into revenue or turn into some sort of sustainable model for the business? So we see, especially since 2017, a lot of platforms raised a ton of money, had a really cool kind of novel idea, white paper, and then they had no money left. They're broke. They couldn't afford to hire proper engineers, couldn't afford to hire the business support teams that you need, marketing, and all of those things. And so I think that's something that if any of you are looking, is anybody looking to build in the space? Like thinking about what to build and how to do that?
Came to the right place.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about doing those things, I think a business plan is kind of obviously seems elementary, but it's pretty important to really try to figure out how does your token model, if you stay out of the regulatory crosshairs, how does your token model or whatever your business model is actually lead to proper sustainability? And so a lot of platforms, kind of rush out of the gate, launch a token, think everything's going to work fine, and realize 3 months later it doesn't really make sense. We made some mistakes. So I think when you're going through this kind of planning process, it makes sense to find some advisors or find people that have been in the space. I know Luigi, head of DeFi for Avalabs, did a talk the other day on tokenomics. It's something that I think a lot of protocols don't spend enough time on, is properly modeling your tokenomics, allowing some flexibility in there as the market changes, or some new wave of concepts come into the ecosystem. How do we adapt to that, and can we adapt?
Yeah.
Also to consider, does your protocol actually need a token as well? Is one of the things that's a bit of a hallmark for RBL projects, with the exception of our money markets, is that we actually don't have tokens for them. Our terminal has no token. Our trading bot has no token. Our informatics platform has no token. And those are all very purposeful decisions. We didn't just not think of a token economics plan. We looked at it and said, yeah, we can tokenize it, and we could probably do quite well with it. But our goal is to take traditional finances, to take non-highly educated retail investors and pull them into DeFi, give them that terminal, that entryway that they can use. If I have to explain to somebody, yeah, come buy the Roam token and then stake it here and you get an emission, you can buy it over here and then you'll get like 3% back, they're gonna be like, I'll just pay in stables, or I'll give you my Visa, right? And that's where the what comes in, is that you know what you're doing, you know how you're gonna do it, you know why you're doing it, you know how to do it, but the what is the key factor. It seems like everybody starts there, but that's where you should end. So on that note, we can go to the next one.
Oops.
Yep.
Oh yeah, there we go, sorry.
Which is considering the ecosystems. Now, we're all at an Avalanche Summit, and I'm not gonna say anything bad about Avalanche. I want Emin breaking through here and tackling me. We started on Avalanche purposefully. We did a whole bunch of research on blockchain 3.0 technology and realized that Avalanche is by and far one of the most interesting and innovative networks out there. But you have to look at the context that you're taking your idea and your plan to get in. Just like when you're building, or when you're growing vegetables or growing trees, right? You don't take a seed meant for arid soil and put it in highly moist soil. You have to make sure your technology fits. Also to look at, does the DeFi space and does an ecosystem need another Uni v2 clone? It actually might. Or does it need another Compound or Aave fork? It actually might. Is how do you bootstrap liquidity in an ecosystem? You give people places to put the liquidity. Uni v2 clones are so prevalent simply because it's so straightforward, everybody knows the contracts are secure, and they're very easy to work with. However, if you're emerging into an established market, or if you're looking to create something that's really going to stand out, don't do that, because I can guarantee you 10 other people have done it, and half of those DEXs that you've never actually heard of.
Yeah, and I think for us, looking at Avalanche as where we decided to build, a part of the ecosystem is also just the way that projects work together, a lot of the collaborative opportunity, the support from the foundations and the development teams of Avalabs was really critical to us. We started building on Avalanche before most people knew what Avalanche was. We were explaining to our venture partners, why we were building on Avalanche, why it was a novel consensus, why we thought the subnet infrastructure was really appealing, and what we thought the future would look like. And they were saying, why the heck are you guys building on a 250th ranked ecosystem? And it makes sense now to all of you guys that are here, because it started to play out. But I think part of that research piece really is understanding what types of support is in place. Is it a collaborative environment? I mean, Avalanche, hopefully, as we're all seeing this week, is probably one of the most collaborative environments that exist, I think. It doesn't feel like it's a competitive environment. We're all, instead of fighting for the same chunk of pie, I think we all believe that in collaboration, we can actually grow the influence and grow the opportunity for DeFi as a whole. So that's a big piece, I think, of planning to launch a protocol or a platform. Are you building in a certain ecosystem on purpose? And that was a big piece for us.
And also, one thing to consider as well on that note is actually your future plans on that. Because when you look at, let's just take Avalanche for an example, right? If I'm launching a pretty straightforward financial application, I can utilize the C chain and I'll be completely okay. I can operate through there. But
if my project has the potential for its own subnet implementation, or from doing some type of IBC service, right? You want to be able to look ahead and look forward to not just what your tokenomics and your platform looks like now, what's it going to look like in 6 months to a year. The reason so many protocols fail so quickly, build fast, die fast, is because they don't think about the future. They get all excited about the bull run. VCs have a ton of money to throw into the space. They'll grab as much as they can, blow it on like insane hires without actually thinking ahead. So make sure you do that when you're working on your ecosystem.
One thing that I think a lot of people struggle with, especially in times like this when, crypto's grown so much over the last little while. Arguably, we've had a pretty fun bull run. Some will say we're still kind of in that growth phase of this cycle. But hiring people in the space is really difficult. I mean, a lot of developers, a lot of engineers that have been around for a minute can command fairly incredible salaries, which sounds good if you're an engineer, obviously. But it's kind of, it's a challenge to find people that really want to build on your platform, that are looking for a long-term relationship. And for us, that was a big challenge at the beginning. As Alex said, you really have to have that vision of what you're doing and why you're doing it to get people engaged. But I think for us, it's we've had a lot of success also bringing people from Web 2, from traditional engineering environments, and kind of teaching them how to build in Web 3, and that's been a huge asset for us too. You can probably talk a little bit more about team building than I can.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. Team building as a process, I've come to find out RBL is one of our hallmarks as well. What we do at RBL is a bit different from most places. The nature of really the space in Web3 is completely distributed and completely global. Not just in the technology, but also in the mindset. Is that when you're starting a company in the DeFi space, in the Web3 space, even the blockchain space at large, if you go at it with a Web 2 mentality, you are going to fail. There is no questions about that. Not because you're a bad leader, not because your company's poorly structured. It's because there are going to be companies which emerge into the space already having the Web3 mentality. They're going to be able to operate effectively in a decentralized manner. I mean, why is it that there's no Apple chain right now? I know Facebook had Libra for a little bit. But one of the challenges is that Web3 companies can be extraordinarily nimble because you have a whole bunch of men and women, mostly guys, but that's changing now, who have met on the internet. JD and I actually, and we worked together for 2 years almost, never met each other in person, literally. We would send tens of thousands of dollars worth of stables to each other every couple of weeks to pay for salaries, pay for servers. I had to trust that he wasn't going to take my money, and he did the same thing with me. We had that with other people as well, but it did work. Because we understood the nature of Web3. At RBL, we're not your traditional hierarchy. There's the executive team, middle management, then you have the employees, then you're bringing people up from the bottom. We did that for a little bit, and I was working 16 hours, JD was working 16 hours, trying to manage all of it. You just can't work that way, especially considering we have developers in the Philippines and China and Finland and Brazil and at Norway at times. So we had to do something different. We had to do something that worked. And what we found worked was an organizational structure that mirrored the technology we're building, which is decentralized. So we've changed Rome Blockchain Labs from a hierarchy top-down model to what's called a flat organization. What that means is we actually have teams centered around the projects rather than centered around a department. So in most companies, the front-end engineers work with front-end engineers, designers work with designers, and then they kind of meet at like a once or twice weekly meeting, and then they collaborate, send files over, and start working. You can't be competitive at that type of process in DeFi. People work too fast. The technology emerges too fast. So what do? We took all that, throw it out the window, and we decided to put the engineer with the designer, with the marketing lead, with the blockchain engineer, all in the same group. They're all talking together. Not only do we have them collaborate, we actually have them make the decisions as a team. So the future of a blockchain, wherever we go, is decided collectively, just as much from a technical perspective as it is a marketing perspective and biz dev and so on. So we've really restructured the way that you look at team organization. And in doing so, you give them the freedom to be leaders. You give them the opportunity to be an executive at times. And that's been very impactful for us.
I got nothing smart to add there, so we'll just move on. Talked about this a little bit a couple of minutes ago, but the support, I think, not only from the ecosystem, but from partnerships and collaborations is something that is really worth spending a bit of time on. It's pretty easy, once you launch your platform, you'll get a lot of interest from other protocols and other potential partners and say, hey, let's do this together, let's do that. And obviously that's exciting, but I think you have to be quite tactful on who and how and when you start to collaborate with other protocols. Otherwise, it just becomes an incredible time cost in trying to partner with everybody. Avalanche for us was really exciting at first because we were early. So, we were one of the first groups to build on Avalanche, so we had pretty much any opportunity to work with other platforms and protocols. But as time goes on, even at a conference like this, there's tens or hundreds of different projects building in an ecosystem. And I think it makes sense to pick your collaboration partners carefully. And when you decide that you're going to work with other platforms, make it meaningful. Spend the time, figure out what a collaboration actually looks like. Make sure you have the support that you're expecting. You can really leverage each other's communities and marketing and all of those exciting things. Just want to make sure we're not going too far over time. Anything to add on that one?
Yeah, as far as support goes, the reason that this is such a important aspect for us, you're probably not going to talk too much, you're not going to hear too much about inter-protocol or even inter-network support, is because in the Web3 space, partnerships were just a Medium article you'd put out, right? Like I'd have a protocol, we're going to go partner with Unicrypt or whomever, great, and we never talked to Unicrypt team. Well, we didn't do that, but people can do that out there, right? And that would actually pump a token. Oh my God, this project's working with this one, and then the token goes up 20%, and then it just falls back down because nothing actually emerges, right? And that was a problem, but that was the standard. What we've changed, at least for RBL now, is that the partnerships that we select are vetted. We make sure we know we've met either on person or on Zoom with cameras on the teams that we're working with. And when we do that, we continually engage them. We look to add value to our partners without expectation of return. Now think about that. How many how many people do you know, how many companies do you work with, give their time, give their attention, give their resources to a partner without saying, all right, now give me some tokens, or okay, now give me an AMA, or give me something like that. We don't do that. Because we know when you give enough in the space, you will receive. That's how it works. It's a give and take constantly. If I go into it expecting to take something from them off the bat, no one's going to want to work with us. So we can't have that mentality. You have to have a mentality of growth and engagement naturally. And that falls in with VCs, with blockchain foundations, with other protocols. When you can be collaborative and then also lead with a hand out rather than a fist out, you're gonna experience growth like you've never seen before. So
awesome. The last, but definitely not least, thing that is really worth considering is, and I think one of the biggest opportunities in the space still is the user experience, right? We talk a lot about switching between networks and bridges and all the different kind of infrastructure layers that are a bit tough to navigate for a lot of new users. One of the biggest opportunities I think in the space still is increasing the quality of the user experience. Obviously, we focus a lot on that given our tooling suites, but really thinking about where are the friction points? What is the user experience of your platform? Smart contracts are amazing, and they can do some pretty incredible things. But if it takes 15 steps, new wallets, and all these permissions and all these crazy things for someone to actually use the protocol, it's a huge barrier to entry. And so, as you're building, different concepts in the space, I think it's worth spending some time on how exactly is a new user, someone that hasn't spent the last 6 months with MetaMask or Coinbase wallet or Trust wallet or whatever, hasn't used the bridges, maybe coming from a centralized exchange or from TradFi somewhere. What is that experience? What's their kind of first take on starting to use your platform? Is it really difficult to figure out, how does this work? What's the information? Where do I get even docs in many cases is pretty challenging. Is there a token? Do I need it? What's the point? And that user experience, I think, is underserved in the space. So there's an opportunity for a lot of people if you're not necessarily building a protocol, but trying to figure out how to get in the space. There's a great opportunity, I think, for specializing in that user experience piece, working with different platforms and protocols on what is that user actually going through when they try to use your technology. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that this point also wraps up perfectly back to our first slide on clarifying the idea. Because one of the things that I can guarantee you almost no one does in this space is actually understands their users, is goes into the mindset, goes into like the day-to-day experience of who they want to use their platform, right? If I'm building some like derivative future contracts, decentralized swap on Avalanche, okay, my grandmother isn't going to use that, that type of application, right? My highly advanced, like cousin over at Harvard, yeah, he might actually use that. But when you understand that, okay, I'm building a platform for a financially specified trader, or I'm building an NFT platform for somebody who likes, the possibility to add videos and GIFs onto these platforms, you'll be able to tailor your user experience much better. You'll be able to look at the partners in the space and see who complements my protocol in a way that I might not be able to do or might not want to do right now that fits very well with the mindset of the person coming to my service. If I'm going to actually go and build a team, what type of individual do I want to bring on as a partner executive or as a contractor or as an employee? If they've been working at an art gallery for the past 5 years and they're coming into blockchain tech now, that's pretty good for an NFT project, right? But if I'm building a financial platform, that might not be the right hire. So make sure you really understand who you're building for, and your project will succeed. And
yeah, I think probably the best time now to open up for questions. We're giving away T-shirts, so it's a bribe. Come up with something good. Does anybody have anything they want to know? Yeah, go ahead.
no.
Thank you. So you were just describing that something that you are part of is actually like boosting up these new projects to pretty much like implement all these new, all these insights that you have been acquiring throughout the time. I totally agree that tokenomics is a really big part of it. But what's what you have like so far? Like, is it kind of like a launch pad, or how do you operate?
Like, how does Rome Blockchain Labs operate?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a confusing question, but not question, but answer. So we started originally as a development shop that was building two specific technologies. So we started to build the algorithmic trading bot, which we've now pushed out as a retail option, and also Rome Terminal. So essentially we're building, which is also live on Avalanche Binance Smart Chain currently, and we're adding a few more networks right away. But it was internal only, so we weren't doing like dev as a service. We just wanted to build what we thought were tooling applications for the space that didn't exist. And as a consequence of that, we started to build a bigger team. We had more engineers that were specialized in both front end and Web3. And we said, hey, we've kind of got some of the secret sauce here. Maybe we should start to build and spin out some actual projects. And that's where Benki came in. We decided, obviously we're huge fans of Avalanche and the ecosystem. We said, what can we do to add actual value to the ecosystem? And that was, build a lending protocol, one of the foundational pieces, obviously, of any DeFi ecosystem, and do that early. Do it early enough that we weren't waiting for, Aave or some of these other larger protocols to come over to Avalanche, so that we could actually start that kind of groundswell of development. So, I mean, our goal really isn't to continue to spin out a whole bunch of new DeFi applications, rather just to continue to build on to the ones that we do have. But it was a little bit of a, we have this team, we have this opportunity, and here is a market that was needing something that we could offer. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's a good question.
I guess, I'm Gabon. My question is, so you built Benki. Who did you have in mind, I guess, as your users for Benki? And also, like, for the future state of said users and the ecosystem? I know it's to grow the ecosystem with staked AVAX and everything else that's going on, but I'm curious about how you plan to impact across other chains, if you do, and I guess what it looks like for Benki in the future.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we had two kind of parallel user profiles when we started Benki. And the first one was just the average retail user in Avalanche. At the time, there was the only really competitive lending protocols were on Ethereum. And so if you were playing DeFi on Ethereum at the time, if you had less than $10,000, $20,000, the gas fees and the cost of getting into the contracts alone essentially ate up all of your yield. So it was a huge barrier for anybody less than a certain asset size. So for us, we said, hey, Avalanche has really low fees, really fast finality and all the exciting things. But for us, it was an opportunity to open up lending to not only larger users, but also kind of anybody, really. You don't need too many assets to be able to participate meaningfully on Benki. So that was one of the first things. Our UI was different at the time from anything else that existed for lending protocols, again, on purpose. So we were trying to appeal to that kind of newer user, someone that may not be familiar with lending, which is not that complicated now if you're using it a lot, but your first time using a lending protocol in DeFi is usually somewhat confusing. So that was kind of the first user profile. From day one, we've always said we had a focus on being, I guess, having a lot of partners with respect to economic risk assessment and modeling, being highly transparent with how we do things, because we see a future where there's an institutional use case for lending protocols, of course, and that's been talked about a lot here now. What Avalanche offers that no other network offers in terms of permissioned capabilities on subnets means that you can have KYC end-to-end. So you can have KYC validation, KYC participants in lending, KYC counterparties, which for institutions is obviously pretty important in the regulatory environment that we have now. So that was kind of the initial focus, was let's build this kind of short-term for retail users. Let's make it as comfortable of a user experience as we can, open up the opportunity to people that otherwise hadn't seen lending in a meaningful way. And then as we scale and as subnets become viable, was then to offer permission services for institutional clients. And I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people participating in the institutional market now. It's kind of let's appeal to larger assets. Of course, that's important. And then our liquid staking really has kind of evolved into how to support subnet scalability. And it's not really something we've talked a lot about publicly, but you'll see in the next little while how our liquid staking kind of translates into lowering the friction for new protocols launching on subnets, and how do they get proper validation and proper delegation size for their nodes, and how we can help with that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? And you will get shirts, by the way. Something else. Never mind. Okay. On the way out, she'll give them to you.
Yeah, it's kind of a elephant in the room question,
Sure.
and maybe you can give me your personal opinions, if not your business opinions.
Sure.
But we're looking at an investment protocol, and there's a lot of regulation around that, and we've been trying to seek advice and seek guidance about build fast and break things versus build 10 steps out and make it future-proof. I just wondered if you had any advice for where we might seek that kind of advice, and how you play in the regulatory space fairly, properly, ethically.
Great question, and it's one that not very many people ask, actually. The reason JD just passed the mic to me is because I focus on regulations and making sure that everything we do, I'm not a lawyer, just for clarity.
Not financial advice.
Yes, also not financial advice. Should tag that in. Is that regulations are one of those things that no one likes to look at, but you have to. And the reason it is because right now there's a complete lack, if you guys aren't aware, there's a complete lack of regulatory clarity, at least from the US, on how are digital assets securitized, right? Is it a commodity? Is it a currency? How should it be structured? And then based upon that classification, how can I build it out, right? One of the classic examples for any digital asset is if I launch a token and then I funnel the profits from that protocol back into the token, I'm a security. And all of a sudden, you have to go get registered, and you have like a bunch of fees if you're not, or you blacklist any country that has that type of securitization. So if you're at the stage now where you're looking at either investing or helping launch that protocol, and you're already asking these questions, don't build fast and break. Because I'm assuming you guys aren't going to be anonymous on that. So what you want to do is actually partner with, if you're working in the States, Lab CFTC, or the SEC. They have lawyers and economists you can talk to that will give you advice about how to structure your protocol based upon what you want to do.
Yeah, and I think some of the advice that we've received, both with Benki and which obviously is pretty exposed, I think, from a regulatory perspective, or at least on the surface seems that way. We have a few different law firms in different jurisdictions, obviously, that have been a big support. It's kind of hard to find crypto attorneys at the moment. But if you have a good idea and if you're willing to actually invest the time and such, you can find good support. I think for us, the kind of leading principle is let's make sure we're not doing anything blatantly wrong. I mean, that's the only thing we can really do is say whatever is obviously outside of what we should be doing, don't do that. And then our attorneys it's kind of their role to tell you, essentially, if you don't want to die, never leave your house. So I guess the blanket advice is if you don't want any exposure to risk, don't build in the space. But having said that, I think if you have proper support, just don't be the low-hanging fruit. My thesis, anyways, obviously not legal advice, so please don't please don't write this down and say that I told you so. But my thesis really is, let's be involved with the regulators as much as we can. Let's try to have a seat at the table as things do evolve, and just make sure that when things come out that we're able to respond. We're able to say, okay, we did best efforts with the information we had at the time. Things have now changed. We now realize that some rule or regulation has come out, and this is maybe not so awesome, so let's respond. But I mean, if you're trying to remove all regulatory risk entirely, you kind of can't do anything. I'm looking forward to a time where, although we all hate regulation, I'm looking forward to a time when the regulation is a little bit more clear, so we can make decisions and stop with the registered all over the world in different corporate structures and all these crazy things, and just build. But yeah, for the time being, just don't be the low-hanging fruit and make sure you keep your head up.
Really helpful. Thank you.
Cheers. I think we're out of time. We're going to get kicked off here. So thank you guys very much. You can reach out to any of us anytime after this if you want.
Yep, we'll be here.
Happy to help.
All right, thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.